3 days left to save primary steel production in Britain.
This government will not just sit back and hope.
Generations of families have worked there, but global pressures have put British steel on a rocky road.
The United States' decision to impose tariffs has had and will continue to have huge implications for the world economy.
The Prime Minister's op-ed today was very clear that he thinks globalisation has failed in the current context and that we need to go further and faster in supporting British industry and the British economy.
I'm doing what I want to do with respect to the tariffs.
Any imposition of trade barriers, tariffs in this case, between the UK and a major market like the US is a disappointment.
US tariffs against China add up to 145%.
The United Kingdom, 10%. These countries are calling us up, kissing my ass, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, please, sir, make a deal.
An old, astute observer of politics once said that there are weeks where decades happen, and he hadn't seen 2025. Every week now, the Trump administration casts the world into some fresh disorder. This last 10 days has been the turn of the international financial and trading system, the basis of global wealth itself. But in all of the grand talk of shifting histories and ending eras, there are pockets, places, where these great economic forces are already rocking lives and livelihoods, where Trump is no mere diversion. One of those places is Scunthorpe. So what we're looking at here, what I'm looking at right now, is unique. It is the last place in Britain, here in Scunthorpe, where you can make virgin steel. Virgin steel basically being able to make steel from scratch, from iron ore. And it is the last place. There is nowhere else left in the UK, which was once one of the biggest steel producers in the world. Now we're 25th, 26th, 27th biggest steel producer in the world. And it is under threat because right now the Chinese owners who've owned it for about 4 or 5 years say it's losing a huge amount of money, £700,000 a day, they claim. And it's not competitive, it's not viable, it can't compete with steel producers in the rest of the world, economically speaking. But of course, if we lose it, the argument goes, this doesn't just matter to Scunthorpe, and we're going to talk about how it matters to Scunthorpe, and it really does matter. But it matters, the argument goes, to the country, because steel is a strategically important industry. Donald Trump says if you don't have steel, then you don't have a country. And what he means by that is that you need it to make arms, you need it to make all sorts of industrial components. And if you're reliant on another country's steel production, then you are vulnerable. You are vulnerable in the way that we're vulnerable to, say, reliance on oil and gas, to someone like Vladimir Putin. This company, though, this plant, this works, probably only has days, weeks to go if a deal cannot be reached with the current owners, or if another buyer cannot be found, or if the government chooses not to nationalise it. Because the raw materials it needs, the coking coal, all that sort of stuff, runs out, they need it. And once those blast furnaces go out, they cannot be reignited, they cannot be started again. So if they go out, British steel production will be over.
Now, a breaking story this afternoon that Parliament will be recalled on Saturday to debate an emergency law to save British Steel's plant in Scunthorpe from imminent closure. Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, is here to talk about this. When I saw this break that they were being recalled tomorrow, I thought, what the hell's that about? It's got to be big, hasn't it?
It's got to be big to bring MPs back to Parliament of any day, but least of all on a Saturday as well, and a week before Easter too.
Talks between the government and the Chinese owners of the works have been fraught.
I think this is the worst crisis we've had. But when we had the crisis back in 2019-20, when Goodall pulled out, the site went into administration, so that was a very managed process. What we have at the moment is a process which is not being properly managed. The Chinese owners, Jingye, should be in a formal, proper consultation about the future of the plant, a legal process, but they're behaving quite recklessly and irresponsibly at the moment in terms of not ensuring that the proper feed of raw materials as is there to maintain the business throughout the consultation period.
They say they're losing £700,000 a day.
Yeah, well, we take that with a pinch of salt. The truth is, though, that this is a business which is not making money at the moment. It's a business that, with the transformation agreement which the government had in place, which the government put forward, would be making money.
And if Keir Starmer said in his speech earlier this week, he said that we're in a new world where the state, the British government, would be intervening more to protect and secure British industry. If, therefore, this is really the first test of that, isn't it? I mean, if he doesn't do it here, where is he going to do it? And
I think that the Prime Minister's made it very clear that all options are on the table for the intervention here in Scunthorpe and Teesside for British Steel, and that's what I will expect to happen.
Here to talk this through with me a bit before I talk to you is Lewis Goodall, presenter of Sunday with Lewis Goodall on LBC and the Newsagents podcast as well. Hi Lewis, thanks for joining me.
I happen to be in Scunthorpe today doing a special report for Newsagents tomorrow on what's going on here in terms of the steelworks. And, you know, what is one of the consequences, just micro consequences of everything that's going on at the moment? Well, suddenly the world's going to find itself with a lot more surplus Chinese steel. Where could that end up? If that ends up in Europe, if that ends up in the UK, places like Scunthorpe and the steelworks here, which are already sort of on its knees, could find itself being completely unviable. So this is still a story with so many angles still to work through and still so many elements still to work through. But it is different from where it was just 24 hours ago. Massive international economic trends are converging on Scunthorpe right now. Trump's tariffs for sure, but also Ukraine, defence, all running through this corner of North Lincolnshire.
This is the kind of conversation which would have sounded absolutely crazy if we were having it only 8 or 9 months ago. But steel is really important in terms of national security and in terms of having a functional defence industry. And I think we are sadly now in a world where countries like the UK do want to retain the ability to create their own steel because it's vital for your defence industry. You know, we've moved on so much. So when Port Talbot blast furnaces closed just last September, we accepted that. But the idea that these Scunthorpe furnaces are going to go, I think you're now really into, for national security purposes.
Nationalisation is a word which has been out of fashion for a long time. It is striking then, with this works at least, how the consensus for it runs across the political spectrum, including the local Tory candidate for mayor.
I get 100 messages one way or another a day just wanting to know what I know and just giving me a perspective on how it feels for people. You know, you can't imagine 2,700 livelihoods being lost is massive. And then there, of course, are the businesses that are supplying this business.
What do you say to, you call for nationalisation? What do you say to someone who says, well, look, however much money this site is losing, we know it's losing money.
Yeah.
Might not be as much as the Chinese say, but it's losing money.
Yeah.
Absorbing that onto the public balance sheet at a time when, as you know, the fiscal situation is dire and probably even worse than it was even 2 weeks ago with everything that's happening, just isn't sustainable. Like, what's the cost of not doing it? Because we know the cost of absorbing it would be substantial.
Well, the cost of not doing it means that you're always going to be left at the whim of the world's supply and price factors, which is something of steel.
This is a town where steel runs through the soul. The fate of these works, the decisions being made thousands of miles away across 2 continents, the subject of a long collective intake of breath. This story is just completely dominating this town, as you might imagine. Everyone in the cafe have just been having lunch and talking about it, all separately. Scunthorpe Telegraph. Closure is far from a done deal. British Steel is consulting its workforce on several options for the closure of its blast furnaces, wider steel-making operations and a reduction in its steel rolling mill capacity. Government intervention is the only way to save steel jobs. Council could lose $10 million a year if furnaces close. And of course, Reform leader Nigel Farage calls for nationalisation.
So we're in the plant at Scunthorpe. These are the last blast furnaces left in the United Kingdom.
Of course, Farage is here, arriving midweek to put on his hard hat and with fire and flame behind him stand with the plant's workers, urging the government to save our steel, like Arthur Scargill in a wax jacket. Inevitably, as always, he sniffs and senses political opportunity. Because you don't have to walk around Scunthorpe's long, well-kept high street for long before you see and feel the anxieties about the works for sure, but all that fused with the cultural and political insecurities which haunt so many of our towns. It is this sense of deep malaise on which Farage is capitalising to an extent which I think is still underestimated in London. What do you think of the state of the country at the moment in general?
Terrible.
Terrible? In what way?
Well, what's future is there? There's no future. So, I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go from here. Farage is probably pulling people in now. Yeah.
Well, you like Farage?
Well, I haven't really followed him a lot, but what he said has made sense. You know, but I mean, what can be worse than this?
What, than Starmer?
Than where we are at the moment. It's
can't be any worse, can it?
I just can't visualise anything worse, actually.
Well, what he's actually done is, when he went in with his manifesto, that's all out the window when he got in.
Right.
He's just like thrown us to the wolves. He didn't bring...
You feel he's thrown you to the wolves?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Let's choose one word to describe the state of the country at the moment.
Rubbish.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Rubbish.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yeah.
I think we're the laughingstock of all the world, really.
Yeah.
All the
Why are we the laughingstock?
Well, with this government, what's happening?
Right.
We're the laughingstock. There are that many millions of pounds. They're saying debt. Yet they're treating all these immigrants with money, clothing, hotel bills. They're just laughing at us. They're just coming over and laughing at us.
You think it should be nationalised?
Yeah, I do, yeah. Because without it, this town's had it, won't have businesses.
Must be a worrying time.
It is a worrying time, yeah. Yeah, it's terrible, really, for Scunthorpe.
Do you think Keir Starmer, the government's doing a good job with it?
We don't know. Only what we see on the phone. That's the only information.
No, we just hope that they're going to nationalise it.
Yeah.
Nigel Farage says it should be nationalised.
Yeah, I think it should be nationalised, yeah. Paid the Chinese all this money, we may as well keep it here.
What do you think should happen with the Steelworks?
I think they should find a solution and keep it on, because there's a lot of people here that rely on it. The local economy must rely on it as well, the people here. If they haven't got work here because it gets shut, they're going to move somewhere else, because some of them will be specialists in what they do, and they can't really then do it from here, so they'll move, and then that takes livelihood and business away from the local businesses.
Even if it costs a lot of money on the taxpayer to nationalise it?
I still think it's worth it. I think if we produce our own steel, be it that it's owned by a Chinese company, if it's done here, I still think it's the best solution. I do think that whoever's in should look after us a little bit better, whoever it is.
Look after us?
our own people a bit better.
In what way?
Well, like this, like the steel. This is British people, it's English people. Like
Trump's been doing?
Well, yeah, a little bit like that, but probably not as extreme as he does it. But I do think that we can learn something from him. He will look after America first, and I think that's where we need to be. We need to be looking after our own country a little bit better, because it's a great country, it always has been. It's losing it, but it can get it back if it's looked after properly, and I think that's where the answer lies.
You can hear the anxiety, you can hear the worry, about the Steelworks for sure, and about the fact that that's such a linchpin of the town, but also more broader anxieties, right, that you would get anywhere about the country, about the state of the country, a really profound state of declinism that you get everywhere, particularly when you travel outside the big cities, even in the big cities often. And that's why Nigel Farage was here this week. It's not because, it's partly because Farage knows that Scunthorpe's the sort of seat that they would want to target. Sure, fine, but the election's a long way away. No, it's because he senses a much bigger political opportunity, which is to channel exactly what that gent said at the end there, about the idea of the state looking after us, being more economically interventionist, being more economically nationalist, moving into that territory that has actually always been majority British opinion, but which has rarely been actually well represented by the parties themselves, which is The average British person is often quite economically left-wing, quite interventionist, wants the state to do more in the economy, to take a bigger role in the economy, but also quite socially conservative. That is where Farage is moving to. Farage doesn't believe in nationalisation. He's an old Thatcherite. He's an old libertarian. But he's moving, just as Trump has done, he's moving to a different political, economic space because he knows that is where the votes are. And so does Starmer. So does McSweeney, his chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney. That's why they're always talking about an age of insecurity. But if they can't prove it in Scunthorpe, then where are they going to prove it? Because the truth is that while Starmer in particular is strong on the diagnosis, we saw that this week, what's his prescription? What does a modern industrial policy look like? What is that? What is his version of levelling up? To be honest, we don't know. It's inchoate. And as long as that space exists, then someone like Farage will fill it. So this is the current kit?
Third kit.
Third kit, oh right, okay.
Spennymoor on Saturday.
Are you going to beat Spennymoor?
Obviously.
Yeah, of course you are.
We're scared of no one at the moment. We've got a roar behind us.
Scunthorpe, obviously, it sort of shows in your club, obviously a place with a strong sense of community, strong sense of being from where you are. Tell us a little bit at the moment about how it feels with everything going on at the Steelworks.
Well, on the Steelworks, this year for us it's our 125th year, and we survived in this year. For them, majority of the fan base have family, they are workers of the Steelworks, or they know people who work on there, and the fans, it's not a good feeling at the moment around the town for businesses that come in to sponsor. We're trying to support them as best we can by doing something on our last 3 home games to show some solidarity with them.
From your conversations with people, fans who are coming in, people who work there, people who know people who work there, and what's the overwhelming feeling at the moment? Stress, anxiety, worry?
Well, I think the main conversation sort of goes around the hope that it will be nationalised and, put back as British Steel as what it used to be known.
Think Starmer's doing a good job with it? Do you think he gets it?
Does he get it? He's going to have to get it, isn't he? He's going to have to get it, or else, as a country, not producing steel, it's massive. It's massive for every area in the country. He's going to have to get it sooner or later.
It's funny, one of the reasons that I'm really interested in stories like this, I mean, obviously the sort of geopolitics is massive, and in the way we've been discussing, it intersects with so many political stories at the moment. But one of the reasons is that it reminds me a lot of sort of one of my own earliest political memories, and one of the reasons I even got interested in politics, which was, as a kid I experienced something very similar to what the people in Scunthorpe or in Port Talbot when we did that story are experiencing now. Because I am from a place similar to this, which was dominated by one big industry, in my case, Rover, which obviously went under, which my dad worked at for many years. And it's funny, I had a message this week from the old MP, who I sort of befriended, who reminded me it's actually 20 years this week since Rover went under in Longbridge in South Birmingham. And the truth is, it's recovered to some extent now, but it never really did. And I remember exactly the sort of weird feeling or weird kind of sense of why was it that, again, the exact same parallel, Chinese company, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away, was making decisions over like my dad's life and my area's life and this factory which dominated everything. And I remember thinking in my very young kind of political brain, why doesn't the government just solve it? Why doesn't it just buy it? And of course it didn't, because those were the rules of politics and economics at that time. it is going to be, I think Scunthorpe and what happens with the works here, it really basically is the test. It is the test as to whether Starmer is right that the economic and political world has changed. Because if it doesn't save it, the government, and maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't, but if they don't, then it's hard to see how any of his analysis about how that world has changed could possibly be true. Because everything that he says matters, politically, economically, strategically. It's here.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.